All right, so we're picking up from this conversation we started on the 702 open line in the previous hour, speaking to the Department of International Relations now about this expulsion of the U.S. Ambassador Ebrahim Rasool. That's our ambassador to the U.S. I do think that this really takes our relations with the U.S. to a new low. But how does our government respond going forward? Chrispin Phiri is the spokesperson for the Minister in the Department of Relations, joins us now in studio. Chrispin, thank you for making time. Good morning.
Thank you for having me, Clement, and good morning to our Radio 702 listeners.
Was the correct process followed here on the expulsion of our ambassador?
Article 9 of the Vienna Convention does enable a host country to then label or declare a ambassador of another country as a persona non grata. And that is the article that the US government has invoked in this instance. Look, some governments would have gone with the option of a démarche, which is to call in the ambassador and ask the ambassador to explain their position, and then from there take a decision whether they will then either ask the South African Republic in this instance to recall the ambassador, or they would do it themselves. So that is the option. Those are the options that are available. But in this instance, Article 9 has been invoked, and we respect the sovereign right of that country of the US to invoke Article 9 of the convention. And we don't quibble with that sovereign right.
Yeah, I wish they offered you the same courtesy. By the way, when you look at sovereignty, when the ambassador of the US ambassador to South Africa, Ambassador Brigitte, lied about us or the government having somehow supplied arms to Russia to fight in Ukraine, you took a different approach. I remember the minister Pando called him to come explain himself, and I think there was a reprimand, but not this extreme option of expulsion. So are you saying in other instances, and normally other governments would go with what you went with the last time you had to deal with something almost similar?
Yes, I think that's normally the approach. Also, you're right, to afford us the courtesies to say that, look, we have engaged your ambassador, we are not happy with 1, 2, 3, 4, and that message would then be transmitted through the diplomatic channels back to South Africa, and South Africa would then duly respond. But it doesn't negate the fact that they could also go for the option of directly declaring an individual.
They have a right to do that.
They have that right, and they've invoked it.
Yeah. What are the normal formal processes to communicate that decision? Because there's so many decisions that have been communicated on Twitter, where sometimes I find our government finds out for the first time on Twitter. It's happened even with when aid was cut permanently. I had the Minister of Home Affairs who said, well, we found out there. So there are many instances where things are announced there on social media, and then I wonder if the official processes are followed. Did you guys receive a formal letter? I know the ambassador must have received one. I saw one circulating. Was there supposed to be a communication to you as government, as Pretoria?
Yes. So what would happen is that the State Department in this instance would communicate this through the ambassador in Washington, who would then transmit the message back to us. That this is the message that I've received. That's the diplomatic channel. Yeah. It's speaking through the host or the ambassador in that particular country. So what we saw in this instance was first the social media announcement, then followed by the diplomatic channel process. Yeah. So it seems that that is the preferred method of the United States to announce it first on a social media platform, and then send you the official communication through the diplomatic channels.
I wonder if you guys are brushing up your skills on social media, because that looks like that's where things are playing out when it comes to the US.
Yeah, well, public diplomacy has taken a completely different shape now, and Twitter diplomacy does seem to be a new platform.
That's it. Yeah. So how do you then respond as government? I know the position now seems like it's not to retaliate. What do you do though?
So what we do is we call back our ambassador, which we have done. Our ambassador will be coming back home, and he must then debrief the president and the minister. And that would entail giving his assessment of exactly what had transpired, what is the perspective of the Americans, and then what then becomes, in his own recommendation, the way forward. So that needs to happen first.
Yeah.
But we do feel that we need the highest level of representation in the United States. So we will be. And we will be sending in a representative as well.
Okay.
So we will be filling that post. We will ensure that there is an ambassador to represent South Africa.
Okay, we'll come
in the
back to that
United
in a
States.
moment. I think you have had the opportunity now as DIRCO to reflect on what Ambassador Rasool said about that sitting president in his host country. I mean, that statement he's made was undiplomatic, especially for someone in his position.
Look, it can be, you can have that analysis to say that may not have been the place to make that statement, and that may not have been the appropriate things to say. But the fact of the matter is that we are here now. He's been declared a persona non grata, and that's what we have to confront. I think applying a retrospective lens of should have, could have, doesn't assist us in this moment. What we maintain is that our relations with the United States are very important. We see them as mutually beneficial. And we want to continue that relationship. So we will then act in a manner that pursues that relationship so that both of our economies and both nations can continue to have the bilateral relations that we enjoyed. Yes, we definitely are seeing that we're in a rocky space now in terms of our bilateral relations. They are not the way they should be. And this is not to say that bilateral relations are always smooth, but we believe that where there are areas of disagreement, that should be handled differently. And that's what we want to get to, where we see that there may be possible areas of disagreement between us, but we handle these in a very mature way and in a manner that is not antagonistic as we are seeing it now.
Don't you think that also reflecting on what he has said actually gives you an opportunity, in fact, it gives you an opportunity to communicate to other ambassadors about the importance of being cautious when you are speaking at forums, or you may be speaking in your quote-unquote personal capacity, even though you're invited as an ambassador? Because I do think that, I mean, I agree with you, could have or should have, but it's important for us to reflect on what the ambassador has said so that the same mistake doesn't happen again. Because I would have thought this is part of their training, right? In diplomatic training, you are trained on what to say, what language to use. You know how to dodge questions if they're about the internal affairs of other countries. And I was looking at the Vienna Convention, where it emphasizes that stay away from opining on, I mean, it doesn't forbid it, but it emphasizes that you have to be cautious of that. Isn't that an opportunity to learn here?
This is well known, Clement, and our ambassadors are well trained. Ambassador Rasool is an experienced diplomat as well. And so that's why it's important for us to debrief him, to understand how he saw this and what could have transpired from his perspective before we also venture a definitive view around these things. It's very important that we engage him directly to understand how he sees this development and what had transpired from his perspective. But absolutely, you are right. And our ambassadors are well trained. That's why this is quite unprecedented, might I add. It has never happened before in any country where we have an ambassador being declared a PNG. So this is something.
Or you have an ambassador who attacks a sitting president in his host country. You've never had that before.
You see, so why I don't want to go into that particular framing of this being an attack is because if you look at the entire audio that was, or the entire speech and presentation that Ambassador Rasool did make, there are many other things that he did say that did show that there's a lot of deference to the American administration. So if we want to pull this specific comment out, we then narrow in on something that really could have been a small comment in a very larger context.
But it was a very important comment, because I
that
looked at
true.
what he said throughout as well.
That may be so.
He actually, when you look at it in context, it makes sense. But that comment he says about supremacy, that's him opining on the internal politics and policies, or whatever the agenda that the sitting president, where he's being hosted, is doing. That is never advisable, especially because you're dealing with a Trump administration that really thrives on backlash. Of course they're going to respond.
Yeah, then that's why we say that it's critical that, and you'd have seen the president's statement, that the appropriate people carry themselves with appropriate decorum across the board. And it applies to even our counterparts on the other side.
So what happens with, because I've got some people on the WhatsApp line saying, Clement, I hope there are going to be people at OR Tambo International Airport to welcome the ambassador. There are people who feel like you can't just leave him hung out to dry. And the position you've taken as government seems to be, we're not going to defend him. We want to hear from what he says, but Yeah, it is what it is. We'll appoint somebody else. And some people feel like that's you just leaving him hung out and dry. How do you respond to that? Do you think you've got a responsibility to defend him?
We have a responsibility to ensure that he gets back now that he's been declared persona non grata. The implication of that is that his immunities will expire within a short space of time. So to protect him, first and foremost, physically and beyond, is to ensure that he comes back. Then we have an opportunity to then really get to understand from him how these things played out. So it's not a question of us leaving him out to dry, but it's focusing on what the most immediate tasks are in this instance. And indeed, look, the South African government communicates its positions to that host country through the ambassador. So we would want to get a sense from him as to how, moving forward, we can continue to communicate our positions. But of course, the South African government really, really has to look at this very critically. And it's not to say that, we are leaving him out to dry. I hear people may want to say they want to welcome him at the airport. It's all well and good. Everyone is entitled in this country. It's a free country. Gather wherever you want to gather, how you want to gather. But I don't think at this stage we would encourage that. We would roll out a public engagement after we have engaged the ambassador as we see fit, because he has a contract with the department. He's still an ambassador contracted to the department. So,
all right, we're going to talk about what this means for our relations with the U.S. in a moment, but I want to quickly take the listeners to President Cyril Ramaphosa, who has just addressed this Trump matter now, speaking in Johannesburg.
Made by our ambassador in straightening out the path to ensure that there is meaningful engagement at the diplomatic level. So this is a hiccup that we are working on straightening out. So we are not being blue-ticked. We cannot be blue-ticked because we are such an important player to the United States of America as they are an important player to South Africa from a political point of view, from a trade point of view, and from a whole number of other important points of view. So we are not blue-tickable, if I can use that term. We cannot be ignored. And so we will, and they have sent a message. They sent a note verbal to inform us about the action that they took. So that shows that they have formalized the communication. So we are not being blue-ticked. We are being recognized, much as it first came out in a tweet, but it did finally come out in a formal communication. And we will engage with the United States of America in a formal way. We will do so with deep respect for them and for President Trump as well. We will deal with the U.S. as an important global player, as we are also an important player. So our relations with the United States are going to be put on even keel. So I would like the people of South Africa not to have sleepless nights, have peaceful nights, knowing that we are working on ensuring that this relationship is put on a good footing going forward, because we trade together, we play together in various sports, and we are political interactors in a number of forums, and so we have to deal with each other without any doubt.
Samgelo, last question.
All right, so that is President Cyril Ramaphosa there addressing what happened to the ambassador, South African ambassador to the U.S. He says, don't have sleepless nights. They're going to continue engaging with the U.S. In a way that shows deep respect. And that's where I want to pick up Chrispin when he says we are not being blue-ticked. I think it's become clearer and clearer that even Ambassador Rasool was struggling to gain access to some State Department officials or senior Republican officials. It doesn't look like the administration wants to meet with South African officials. They're quick to meet with AfriForum or the DA. They haven't given us the names of who they've met with. But why is it that we still haven't been able to confirm a meeting?
That is actually a good question. And it's just what makes this development quite, as the president says, a hiccup, is that he was on the verge of securing that engagement. In fact, on the 20th of March, he was going to the White House to get an official date as to when he would be meeting senior White House officials. So he had made significant progress despite what faceless people are saying in various publications. I've read reports of that kind. On the contrary, Ambassador Rasool had really made significant developments.
Took him a while, though. It took him a
Well,
while.
40 days. This administration has only been in place for 40 days.
And yes, AfriForum was able to get in there, and the DA were able to get in there and meet with people.
Not
that
in
they
the
met
White
with.
House, my friend. They claim that, but we don't have official pictures of doing so, and we don't have evidence that they did.
They said they're
So,
protecting the people that they spoke to.
I mean,
Well,
if you are
officials
engaging
there.
an administration in a capacity that warrants anyone's attention, that does not require any protection.
Yeah, I wonder. I don't think they lied, you know? I mean, I think a lot of things about the DA and AfriForum, but I don't think they're lying about meeting with people in the White House.
Well,
Someone close to them has the audience of the president. And there's no other way to explain the decisions that the Trump administration has taken against this country, except, of course, the ambassador speaks at a webinar. It gets cut, that clip gets sent to the Secretary of State of the US, who then makes a decision quickly on Twitter before sending official communication. There are people here that have easy access to some people who are close to Trump.
Yes, well, that may be so, but it's not to say that our ambassador in Washington at the moment was not able to exert South Africa's impact. And what people would say is that, yeah, we met these senior officials. Well, who are those senior officials if you don't have an Africa desk in place in the US? If you don't have a trade office? The trade office that got only nominated
Could be advisors.
a couple of weeks ago. So what we believe is really engaging those particular individuals, because not only are they the experts on this region, but they actually have to implement the decisions of that.
But Trump doesn't care about
So
experts.
they're not in
Isn't
place.
he firing them?
They're not in place, and well, he may be firing some, but
Yeah.
in this instance, he's not nominated those individuals. So it means that even from a policy point of view, the Americans are not yet in a position to make very determined decisions around trade and around how you even approach Africa as a continent.
Which is why the advisors are the most important people to talk to right now.
Which I say,
Which is what
Ambassador
Helen
Rasool
Ziller-
was really on the verge of
Helen
securing
Ziller
that
told
meeting.
me already late last year, just after the win or whatever, he was able to meet with Trump's advisors.
Look, and let me also say that the president, it's not like the president has not spoken to President Trump. If they've had that conversation. So it's a question of how we ensure that whatever we discuss has the potential to be implemented administratively. That's also our role as DIRCO. It's not the sake of having conversations for the sake of having them, but the ability to follow up on where these conversations end up in the administration is critical.
Yeah.
And that's where diplomacy, the difference between diplomacy and ultimately our policy and interests end up finding expression, is our ability as the department to ensure that the relevant counterparts in the State Department are seized with the matters of the Republic as we see them.
Yeah, but I wonder, do you have a new approach, Chrispin? Because if you want to relate with the US the way you would ordinarily relate with any other country, that's never going to work. You are not dealing with any other country. You're not dealing with any other president. You're dealing with a very unique president who has completely taken a 360 degree on what diplomacy is, on how he looks at protectionism. So you need to change your approach at some point. So are you going to be just someone who always takes okay, sure, we're still going to be diplomatic and do this? And I'm not suggesting you must do outrageous things like the things that are done to us, but I'm just saying that if you think you're going to sit back and be the bigger person in the room consistently to the same people who are showing you that they don't care about that's never going to give us results.
Clement, what you must understand is that our relations with the United States are also with the people of the United States. How we interact with that country is a reflection of what we believe those people are. So yes, the administration may take a particular posture at some particular point, but we need to be able to think about the long term of our relationship with the people of the United States. Secondly, of course, we need to be agile to the new policies that we are seeing in this administration and respond in accordance with those policies. So, for example, some people would say this president prefers bilateral relations over multilateral relations, or he prefers having a bilateral trade relationship over one that is a free trade area. Those are things that, of course, we have to look at and adjust to that current phenomenon. And that's definitely what we're doing. But those messages and that type of approach is not done on Twitter. It's not done here now in interviews. That is the type of engagement that you have directly with the individuals who are implementing these policies. And that's what we want to do. So that is the approach, and it's tried and tested, Clement. You're not going to win this by or you're not going to be successful by out tweeting President Trump.
Well, the reality is we've never been here before. So
but
we
you're not
really
going
don't know.
which country is doing it. Also ask yourself that. If a country like, for example, Canada, who are their neighbors currently, and you can see that the relations are a bit strained.
But they've also taken a firm stance. They've drawn the line.
They are able to respond with a trade
Retaliation.
A trade retaliation. So we can't be retaliating exactly. There's a template on how you retaliate, or retaliation is the best approach. We have to assess it based on what is the issue before us.
Okay.
Right now, the issues that the ambassador has been deemed a PNG, we must respond by sending a new ambassador.
When are you expected to do that?
We are in the process of doing so. But what's important first is for the ambassador to come back.
Yeah.
Once he's back, then those processes would be full steam ahead. But the preliminary processes have begun.
You still need to you still need to present the person's credentials to the US, right?
The president would have to take a decision, and then they would present the credentials of this individual to
Can
the
they
US.
say no, not this one?
They would have to give very substantive reasons, but it has
The US must give substantive reasons.
A reason is a reason.
Okay.
But it's not impossible for them to do so, but it wouldn't be advisable.
Okay. And then just lastly, have they sent any credentials for who they want to appoint here as ambassador?
In fact, as we speak today, we are expecting the Charge d'Affaires, who was originally in Ethiopia, to be coming here after Ms. Dana Brown had resigned. So we'll see Mr. Green. So they still have not nominated an ambassador to South Africa, despite this noise around a particular individual who's, it appears, declared themselves to be a nominee. But officially, as we understand it, there is no official nominee from the United States to South Africa.
Chrispin, Phiri, thank you so much for making time. All the best.
We shall not be blue-ticked. Thank you very much.
You have a tough 4 years, you and your ministry and your department coming up. So all the best.
Hanging out with Clement
on 702.
Let's walk the talk.